Alright, so today I'm with Ince, Quake Champions competitive player and esports analyst and generally expert in on the Quake scene. So how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, how are you?
I'm doing great as well. So, my first question that I always start with, your name, where does it come from? What's the story behind this?
I mean, my nickname, there's not really an origin story there. My first nickname was like Bruno LP. I'm not really gonna say where the LP comes from, because it was just the band I was into, obviously Linkin Park. And I was like 10 years old, so and then I got into like this clan, which was like IWC in Action Quake 2. It was just Insane Warrior Clan or something, and I just took the first letter, which is the I, and I just got like IWC.insane, and for some reason I liked that, so I kept it. And then I just shortened the insane to Ince, due to popular demand.
Alright, so now you're mostly famous in the Quake Champions scene as a player. As you take part in tournaments. You've had some really good results in 2v2. I think you've played with Vanger. You've played with, I think, Kilson at the DreamHack Winter. And you've managed to get some pretty good success. But before, from what I've seen on the Quake Live scene, you are mostly known as a caster. So, like, what's the story behind this? Like you as a caster and you as a player.
I think I've always preferred competing to casting, but back in 2011, I want to say, that's basically when I got into Quake Live. I was like playing it for 3 months, 6 months, and that was too good. And Joe Miller casting Quake Live, but then they quit, and that was like this big void where no one was really casting any duel. There was Level Up casting TDM tournaments and so on, but they didn't really like duel, and Zoot wanted to start casting more duel. And we decided to just collectively start casting more duel tournaments since there was nobody doing it. So that was fun. I just kept doing it. I still took part in tournaments there, but I was like not really practicing much, doing other things, and I was casting a lot of Quake Live, like 5 hours a day for like 3 or 4 years in a row.
So now, how does the way you approach and view the game change from a caster standpoint and a player standpoint, so compared to what you did in Quake Live and now you're competing in Quake Champions?
Like, as soon as I started casting, it allowed me to understand the game on much more deeper level. So when I was playing, I wasn't really thinking, like I would think about the timings and that was about it. But when you start casting, when you start analyzing what's going on, you realize you can go so much deeper into the game. So my game evolved from being basically like a brainless guy that would only rush because I had good aim to a very patient defensive guy, and I would start focusing on like not making mistakes. Up to this day, if you see VODs of me playing Quake Live, I'm just camping, doing my best not to do any mistakes. And it's not really entertaining, but that was what I was going for back then. And in Quake Champions, I haven't really found a way to do it properly because of all like the different move speeds and different mechanics that all champions have. I think it's a lot harder to play without mistakes. There's still people that can pull it off, like Base, for example. He can do that quite well, and Rapha, but I still haven't clicked with it yet.
All right. So just something I'm thinking of right now, like seeing that you're wearing the Tuesday sweatshirt. So I was wondering, because yeah, I think I saw a little while ago that you were the owner of Tuesday, right? Or like, what's the?
Like Tuesday started as like just the team that Clawz and Silencep and Latromi and Dron made, and they just got like a lot of different people to help them to do, just so they wouldn't have to do things. Like they had someone coaching them, they had people recording their VODs, they had people scheduling scrims for them, and they decided they needed someone as well to like try to talk to orgs and organize that part of the business that they still didn't really know about. So I was just doing that job for them. Sadly, Quake wasn't big enough then, so we couldn't really get into any orgs, but we got pretty far with some interested parties. Sadly, nothing panned out, but they're all doing good now, so I'm happy for them. but it wasn't anything like super serious. It was that we were just a fun team. I mean, they were. I was just helping them.
Yeah. So now, one thing I really like about you is your analytical content that you do. Like, for example, I remember it was, I think prior to QuakeCon 2018, you had done like a little listing of the different teams, and like who do you think for 2v2, like which teams you thought that were, would win, like which were the favorite, the dark horses and everything was quite interesting to read. And also like you've recently put out a Quake Champions dual power ranking also, which yeah, sparked some good conversation, and it is, yeah, quite interesting. So like what is your approach to this analytical aspect? Like, is this something that you just like do in your free time for the fun, or like, yeah, like basically how do you view basically creating this esports content regarding the scene?
I mean, I'd love to do a lot more of that, because I think it's lacking a lot in Quake. There aren't really many people doing analytical stuff. I see like a guy doing like analyzing his own VODs and followers VODs on Twitch, which is called Taka does stuff, like an underscore between each word. I like what he does, but there aren't many people doing it, and I think there's a lot to analyze in Quake, and I would like there to be a lot more content. So whenever I see there's a lack of it, I try to do something myself. And like, I love statistics and all of that. So it's every time I start doing something, I just go on with it for like 5 hours in a row, like with a power ranking. Power ranking works based on like, basically I tiered every LAN. Like major LANs like PGL and DreamHack Winter were like tier 1, and then there's like tier 2 events, tier 3, and then the lower events, which are major online events with over $1,000 in prize pool, like Quake Open League. And basically winning a Quake Open League would give you 50 points, which is the same as getting a top 16 in a major LAN. And that's basically how the power ranking works.
All right. So now, one of the major changes that we saw in Quake Champions this year was this huge ability to nerfs. This huge nerf to abilities, which was, yeah, quite interesting, especially all the damage dealing abilities. So now that we got to see one major tournament in both 2v2 and duel, so DreamHack Winter, post this huge ability nerf. What is your take on it? Like, how did you feel? Do you think it really impacted the scene?
I'm not sure, actually. I think like a lot of people were scared that it would make the duel a lot like Quake Live, but it's so far from it, because in Quake Live, basically a fight would take 7 to 10 seconds, because both players would be like 100, 150 or 200, 200, and the weapons were really nerfed in Quake Live. And in Quake Champions, even without the abilities, the weapons are so buffed, they do so much damage that a fight is over in like less than 2 seconds usually. The rockets are super powerful, the LG is powerful, the nail gun is super powerful as well. Even the machine gun, there's like 2 or 3 times the damage that it did in Quake Live. Same with the shotgun. So I think, but without the abilities now, I think it's a lot harder for like players to just rush off spawn. I think like since they can't really rush off spawn, it enables players who rely more on control and position to excel a little bit more. That's why we're seeing Rapha do so well compared to other players. And if you look back to other events, you would have Rapha having like not that great results usually, because he's a lot more consistent than other players. And I think with the abilities, it's not so much about consistency, it's about like having these little moments in the game. So I think having these little aggressive moments that pay off would make you have better results back then. But now it will be a lot more about consistency and just overall skill.
Yeah. So regarding this those ability nerfs that we saw, it was quite interesting that on a almost how can I say this? Like on a very major aspect, the community, at least like the casual side of the community, seems to have been very welcoming of those changes. I remember seeing on Reddit like how how happy people were of seeing the abilities nerf. But we saw a bit of disapproval on the professional, on the esports side of things from players. And like what I'm referring to mostly, of course, is the Dooi rant that you've probably seen, with Dooi like making very long Twitter posts explaining his discontent regarding this changes, and especially the fact that the developers had been fine-tuning the abilities for so long, only to just like throw all this away for a very different balance, a very different approach to the game, and also the fact that it would make the game more like Quake Live, as you've talked to a bit. So yeah, I'm just like generally curious, what are your thoughts on the Dooi rant? And because it feels like not that many people agreed with what he said, but I'm not sure like if that's really what it was, or if it was just like people not wanting to also bitch about the game online. So yeah, well, what's your take on this?
Well, first off, on the casual side, I think a lot of people are happy with it because the abilities were just another tool for veterans to bash the newbies, basically. Because it takes longer for newbies to understand parts of the game, and they already have to like worry about the movement, the weaponry, positioning, etc., and then the abilities as well. And the abilities being so powerful will only allow the veterans to hit them harder. On the Dooi part, I mean, I'm not sure what he was going for because the game has been changing a lot. And as far as I'm concerned, I think it's really brave of the developers to have this idea out there. They want the abilities to be powerful and then decide when they realize it's not working as they wanted to just go in a completely different direction. I think it's very healthy that they are brave enough to do these kind of decisions. And I'm not really sure what to think of the Dooi rant specifically because even he deleted the post after, so I think that's enough said there.
All right. So generally speaking, regarding 2018 and Quake Champions Esports, what do you think are the strongest element to take away from this? Like, what do you think were the highlights, like the standout performances, or just like generally speaking, some elements regarding the game and the scene that you think were the most important?
I mean, standout performances besides Rapha, because he's been the standout player overall for Quake. Now with this performance in Quake Champions, he's managed to like be the best Quake player of like throughout all of the Quakes because he's won the most tournaments. Besides him, there's shout out to Cypher Online because he's been, I don't know how many Quake Open Leagues he's won by now, like 5?
Yeah, probably.
Maybe? I don't even know, and he's currently playing, as we're recording this, the Battlefight tournament, and he's already in the finals, so there's another one for him. Who else? I mean, the Hank, he won all of the team lines with Rapha. I'd have liked to see Cypher have better results on LAN. I'm not sure why his game is so different on LAN than it is on LAN. On LAN, it seems that, I don't know, like the thing with Cypher is that he mind tricks himself, basically. Because you see him playing this really good game when he's confident, and then if something happens, if someone wins the fight against him, he starts playing different. He starts changing his sensitivity, changing his mind, changing everything. He's a bit like Sears in that regard. Speaking of Sears, he also had really good performances. Venger started the year off a bit rocky, but he's starting to have very good performances now, and I think next year Venger will have even better performances. Same with Series if he decides to actually grind harder. But I think Rapha reached a level that it's going to be really hard for someone to get him out of.
But who do you think will be the Rapha challenger for 2019? Like, if you've got to choose one player that you think has the most chances to beat Rapha and surpass him, or at least like put up a really good fight during 2019, who would that be?
I have like 4 different players that could do it. First off, Cooler, because he's shown that he's played at high level for so long and he's still up there. Like, he's been top 4 in every single Quake game that he's played for like over 15 years. It's crazy, and he still grinds like 12 hours a day, 15 hours a day if he has to. is always in an amazing shape. There's also Kilson, who's recently had really good results, really good games against everyone, versus Rapha in DreamHack Winter. I thought that game was going to go to the tiebreaker map. I think he got really unlucky in some moments, and I think he was playing really, really well. And I think it's probably the closest game we've seen Rapha had in all of DreamHack Winter. There's also Cypher, if he manages to step up from his online performances and do it at LAN. And then there's Clawz, if he manages to go over his mental hurdle against Rapha.
Mm-hmm. What about Razy? Because I mean, Razy did manage to beat Rapha at the Italian Open, despite coming from the loser bracket. And like honestly, if I were to answer my own question, I'd say it's Razy that has the most chances of being this top challenger for 2019, because I feel like he's really good at adapting, and he's got this mental strength that like other players don't seem to have. Like for example, during the Italian Open, he was, as I said, coming from the loser brackets, grand final against Rapha, who's just won PGL, and managed to win this. Like it takes not only just incredible raw skills, but also just the mental strength that, for example, Avik doesn't seem to really have managed to show during the DreamHack Winter grand final, as in getting beaten 3-0 and not looking as confident as Razy seems to be. So, and also just generally speaking, I feel like Razy is really good at adapting to the meta and the way the game is played. So I mean, I think that's personally the player I'm really looking forward to seeing. But of course, everyone that you've mentioned.
If I had to choose like 6 instead of 4, I would have like both Avik and Razy. Razy's always had really close games against Rapha. Like even in the start of Quake, he went versus him on the QuakeCon 2017, and he very close lost to him. Like he was about to win the M6, and then he couldn't dodge the shot in the bridge, and he ended up losing that map and then the next one. And that might have been, for a lot of players, that if they had lost a game like that, they'd have probably uninstalled, because that was just a really bad mistake to do. But he came back from it. He's the one that plays in most tournaments. He's the one that's had best consistent results all around, besides Rapha. And I don't know, I think it raises that on major lands, he hasn't gone past top 8 yet. Mm-hmm. So I think I would put him in that list if he managed to get like a really good semi-final finish. Mm-hmm. And with Avik, I think Avik was playing phenomenal at that event. I'm just not sure how consistent can he make it, because Avik's like, if he's on fire, he can beat anyone in the world, but it's also very easy for him to not show up like that. Like in previous lands, we didn't really see a good performance from him. In QuakeCon 2018, he lost in first round, and in the other previous lands, he wasn't really getting top 4s either. So I'm not sure. But at final as well, I remember he had a wrist injury or something, so he was struggling a bit, and Rapha knew that by like the first 5 seconds of spectating Avik, and then when he switched to 5 seconds of spectating Rapha, you already knew how that game was going to go, because Rapha just looked so determined and secure, and Avik looked very shaky.
Absolutely. So another little question that I'd like to think about is the 2018 duel, like the little tournament, the BO1 winner takes all little tournament that we had, the duel showdown. I think that's what the name was. Because there's a lot of debate in the community regarding this tournament, because it's like the only basically tournament that we've seen so far in Quake Champions with a best of 1, and it wasn't intended as a very serious tournament. And what's quite interesting regarding this, that some people like take this tournament very seriously and the results that we've seen very seriously, whereas some others, like remember I think it was Machiavelli saying that like this tournament was just like a fun thing you do on a Sunday. And so what do you think, like to what extent do you think the results that we've seen at QuakeCon 2018 in duel should be taken into consideration?
I had like an inner debate when I was like doing the tiering for that LAN for my power ranking, and I consider that LAN to be a tier 2 LAN. Like normally a QuakeCon would be a tier 1 LAN, but because it was a best of 1, and just like the the fun tournament as a 2v2 as a main tournament, I decided to put it in as tier 2 LAN. So basically it has the same value to me as I don't remember what other LANs are in tier 2 right now, but it's not as big as most of the other LANs we've had this year. Yeah. But I think it's still a QuakeCon, you know, so there's not, in Clawz managed to win previous QuakeCon, in this QuakeCon there's not really much that you can take from him from winning that event, because it's still it's the best of one. And I think at the hang on versus anyone else in that tournament that is the final, he probably would have won. But since it was Clawz in the hang, I don't think he had ever played Clawz in a duel before. And it's such an aggressive style as Clawz in the best of one. If you're not ready, if you can't adapt in the first round, that map is gone. And that's just what happened to the hang.
So you seem to know Clawz quite well. I mean, since you were both in 2Z, 2Z. Is that how you say it? 2Z.
I guess if you're it depends if you're American or British.
Yeah, I'll say 2Z. And so what I'm curious regarding him is that he's always acting up as like this player that never practiced, like this player that's always going just like talent only, and he seems like he really doesn't care about the game in a way, like compared to other players who seem super dedicated, like Rapha or cooler. And so like, to what extent is he really like this I don't really care, I'm just good, I'm gonna win player, or is he more like just being more discreet regarding his practicing?
I mean, his I don't care approach is applies to when like bad things happen. Like I remember when TZ were practicing Sacrifice, he had a really bad internet, and sometimes you just lag out for like 2 or 3 seconds, and sometimes you lag out for like a minute, sometimes you lag out for a whole game, and he's like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. He just keeps playing. Like that kind of stuff doesn't affect him at all. So his I don't care attitude really comes from that, and it's really healthy actually, because like if he gets like telefragged, he doesn't really care about it. He just keeps playing. It doesn't affect him at all, regardless if it's in the final of a tournament or not. The only thing he seems to care about is when he goes versus Rapha. Then he really cares. But regarding practice time, he puts in a lot of time. Maybe not exactly in duel, but he puts in a lot of time in like having really good aim, having really good combat skills. Not so much in like the tactical aspect of the games, but he's always playing an FPS game, whether it's Quake Live, whether it's some other game, whether it's Quake Champions, TDM, Publics, he's playing a lot.
Okay. So now, regarding 2019, so it's basically certain at this point that CTF will be the competitive team mode, with 2v2 having just been removed from the ranked game mode inside on the live build. So what do you think we can expect from this? I mean, like regarding American teams, EU teams, maybe Australian teams. Like generally speaking, which teams do you think will form or have already formed actually, and which one do you see being the top contenders?
I mean, I can only talk about the NA teams because EU is not going to even try to field any teams until there are tournaments announced. There hasn't been a single high tier pug in EU yet, and NA is already making teams and doing scrims. So NA definitely has the upper hand already. And Team Liquid, I don't know what kind of teams they're going to come out with, but they're going to be like the team to beat for sure. In EU, there could be a lot of different teams. I can't even like begin to make rumors about it, because it just depends who even decides to play it. But the thing is, the EU players are not going to start playing and start practicing for CTF until there are tournaments announced. And as of now, we still don't have any tournaments announced.
Yeah.
And Australian teams, I don't know. I'd like to definitely see a couple of Australian teams. I'd really like to see South American teams, because they've always been really good in CTF and those kind of game modes. So I'd really like to see those. I'd also be very interested to see a couple of Russian teams, like Russian-only teams, because we don't really see them playing a lot of CTF. But they probably are, because they have like their own little hidden community, and they do everything together. So I don't know, maybe a team of Russian pros, like imagine like Cypher, Cooler, Toxic, and Avec. Not really all Russians, but for Toxic, everyone would be speaking Russian except him. But that would be like a really sick team. Like could be one of EU's team, and then you could have like Western or Central European team with like the 2Z guys or something. I don't know, or even the guys that are in match right now, like Zron, Razy, Silencep, and Clawz. That would be another sick team from EU. So I really don't know. I think Team Liquid is going to be the team to beat, but EU, I think they will be lacking behind unless they actually make the teams and start pugging as soon as possible. The thing with EU is that when a new game mode gets announced, in an 8, it's really healthy because they all start like doing pugs together. They find out who goes well with who. They talk about it openly. In EU, nobody wants to do any pugs. It's like, as soon as a new game mode is announced, everyone is like DMing each other, making their own little teams. Nobody talks like publicly at all. Nobody practices. And then you end up with second places basically, because it's just shuffling every time. You just end up with like really weird chemistry teams, which are really like mixes. And that's enough to beat like the second best NA team. It's usually not enough to beat Liquid.
So apart from that, going back to Sacrifice, what do you think was the cause of 2Z losing this upper hand in Sacrifice? Because as we all know, 2Z won QuakeCon 2019 in Sacrifice, but then lost at both DreamHack Denver and DreamHack Winter to Team Liquid. So what do you think was the cause of 2Z losing the leadership in this game mode?
Clawz and Latromi. To put it bluntly, they after winning QuakeCon, mostly Clawz, he was like really happy. He thought he had like achieved everything, so he practiced little to nothing for DreamHack Winter, and I knew that the Zron and Silencep, they were really eager to practice, and Latromi couldn't find time because he has like a full-time job and a girlfriend and everything, and it's really hard to find time for him to practice. And with Clawz, he was like, by then he was really like, I don't care, and it showed, because his performance was not even half of what he played like in QuakeCon, both in Duel and in Sacrifice. And Zron and Silencep, they were performing like beasts. But sadly, if you don't got all 4 members performing at their best, you're not gonna win the tournament.
So now, another subject that's been put into question a bit regarding the esports of Quake Champions is the Champions bans. Because we used to have those, because at the time we had like some very overpowered characters, like for example we had Sorlag for a time before the Champion bans. Also before Champion bans we had Doomslayer and GK as well, most recently. It's mostly Vu, of course, so like the first one I see like basically contesting this, and with the argument that since it's a well, Quake Champions is still a hero shooter deep down with all the champions, and so having bans basically means that people can't really play the champions, can't really specialize, and that it also, like from a viewer standpoint, it's a bit of a shame, because you don't get to see, for example, Toxic play Slash, which is super good with, Kilson playing Nyx, or Razy playing Clutch. So what do you think regarding this question of the champion bans? Because on the other side we've got players like the Hang who think that it's quite necessary as a safety net, and also to add complexity, to add depth to the game, always taking into consideration this element of banning a champion for yourself and the enemy. So yeah, what's your take on this topic?
I'm not sure. I understand like both points of views, because I think watching Vu play Anarchy versus Toxic Slash would be really cool, but at the same time, I think it's necessary because it does add a tactical element, and it does favor players that actually learn the more champions instead of players that are like a one-trick pony. So I don't know. I'm fine with like both systems. I don't think I really have a favorite, and I think both should be experimented with, really. That's my whole take on it. I don't really take sides here.
Okay, I see. No problem. I mean, I also kind of feel that way as well, so no problem there. You don't always have like to be super like decided on everything and always be fighting for a cause. It's all right. So now, for my final question. So the patch that we've got that was released Thursday. So apart from the lackluster performances, crashes, and everything that we've got. This patch itself, like we had some little balance changes as well, like some little nerf to abilities, reducing the timing. Nothing like, for example, Peeker got a little buff, Ranger got nerfed, removing the bug that would make his orb do 200 damage. I think DK's flames also made longer. BJ got a little buff. Well, what else did we say?
Eisen got fixed.
Sorry?
Eisen got fixed.
Yeah, Eisen also. So yeah, like, what are your thoughts on this patch? Because it doesn't seem to be as major of a patch as what we've seen with the abilities nerf, but it's like there were some good changes in there. Like, do you think some of it will have an impact going into 2019?
I think this patch is basically the CTF patch. I think most of the changes are pretty minor balance-wise, except for Eisen's, which, I mean, he was picked because he started blocked items, but because he was impossible to hit, now it seems to be a lot easier to hit. Regarding the other changes, I don't think there will be much of a difference except Ranger, because he could do the combo for like 200 damage, and now it's only 125, and you actually need to like commit to the orb. Besides that, I think it's mostly just about CTF. I'm kind of like surprised they didn't mention they dropped 2v2 ranked in the patch notes, because I really like playing the ladder there, and there's a lot of like players that pretty much only play that, and they're all not sure of what to do now with the game. But with CTF, I wonder if they're still going to touch it further, because I'm pretty sure that they still will, because right now Anarchy, for example, when he can just cap in like 2 seconds, and it's really hard for a defender to stop that, because if he comes in already at 1000 EPS, he's getting out at 1000 EPS. How much you can do about it, because the maps are basically free-for-all maps, not really designed for CTF, with CTF in mind. They don't really have the choke points, but that's being worked on. So we'll have to see what it goes from there. I'd like to see like some alternative to the cap system. Basically, there are like 2 possible things that come on top of my mind. One is like having NTF like speed caps when you're carrying the flag, which I don't really like, because if I want to pick a fast champion, I want that champion to remain fast. I'm picking that champion explicitly to run the flag, so I don't want the speed to be capped. And then there's like having a capture time like on sacrifice, which I think would probably be the better option, like having a 2 or 3 second cap time, so that you would need to actually make a coordinated attack, and you couldn't just like swoop in and get the flag and get out with 2 seconds.
Okay, so slowing the game down, generally speaking.
Yeah, making it slightly more coordinated.
So, what do you think of Citadel as well as a map? Because like for now, it's the only symmetrical map that we have. It's only CTF.
It's not symmetrical though.
Yeah, like, well, as they say, the most symmetrical map they've made so far. Like, what do you think of it? Do you think it will be a good map to compete on?
Yeah, I think it's a really cool CTF map. Even though it wasn't played a lot back in Quake Live, there were a lot of maps that were played a lot more. It's a pretty cool map, and I hope they like start going more towards those maps. If we go more into CTF, they want CTF to be the competitive mode. They need more of these mode-specific maps, and not just adapt the free-for-all maps to whatever game mode we're playing competitively now. I think it's a good thing.
Oh, yeah, I agree. So now, before we close this interview, have you got any like final words, some shout outs, or just anything you'd like to say?
Can't really think of much. Shout out to everyone that watches my content, whether it's on my awful posts on Twitter or the random analytical content I post out sometime. And if you cheer for me on tournaments, well, tough luck. Because there's nothing good coming soon for me.